Were there any setbacks, whether it be hard classes, difficult people, self-doubts and what am I going to do after I graduate?
Being in your position, I can just only imagine like the amount of stress that you were under, and also being able to, kind of climb yourself out of that situation. So
the biggest tip that I guess the biggest tips that I have, the first one is that.
What's up, everybody? This is the Chris and Glenn Info or CGI podcast. Welcome. I'm your host, Chris.
I'm your other host, Glenn.
We're two friends who enjoy having interesting conversations about interesting topics with interesting people. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest, John Brewer. So John is a fifth-year PhD student at UCLA in the Material Science and Engineering department. He is also the recipient of the extremely coveted National Science Foundation, or NSF, Graduate Research Fellowship, which is awarded to only about 2,000 students annually across the entire nation. And fun fact, Science Magazine has called this fellowship the award to get for early career engineers. And John has also made a lot of contributions in the field of science and engineering, despite being a young engineer. One of his most exciting works involves a project that's funded by Mark Zuckerberg, Stephen Hawking, and Russian billionaire Yuri Milner. So this is called the Starshot Project. And maybe we'll hear about this in a little bit. And all in all, John's a fellow friend, a lab mate from grad school. And John, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. How you feeling?
I'm good. Yeah, it's a good day. Long weekend, chilling out, just cleaning my house, the usual stuff.
Right on.
It's good.
Glenn, you want to kick it off with some of the first questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So I know John and I have also talked before, but just to kind of introduce yourself, I know you went to Arizona for your undergrad, but if you want to start there, that's fine. But if you do want to go back, I kind of want to learn about how did you even decide that you want to study engineering and how you ended up in materials engineering? So go back as far as you feel like it's relevant. Just kind of lead us to your journey from that into engineering.
Yeah. I guess it goes back pretty far. I have two older brothers. Both of them also went to college to be engineers. And my dad basically also did something very similar. He went to college to be, he ended up going into physics, but I've always found science super interesting. So I just had a lot of interest in science and mathematics from high school, middle school onward. I think a big part of that is I thought I was pretty good at it at the time. And so I kept doing it. And that ended up bleeding into other hobbies in high school. So in high school, I would do these summer camps. One of them that I could do in my hometown was a robotics camp that the robotics team at Buena put on. And so Buena had its own competitive robotics team for, I think it was First Robotics. It was funded by that same guy who invented the Segway or whatever. He put a lot of money into those types of programs.
Nice.
What our program at my high school was not specifically funded by that guy, but that program being started was funded by that guy. And he did some other stuff too. I don't know. But anyways, this robotics camp I would go to, I went to it for 2 summers. And then also there was an engineering program at my high school. So there are real engineering classes you could take about different topics. And so I actually I did that. I learned a lot. It was interesting to solve problems. And then when I got to college, I went to University of Arizona, as Glenn said, in Tucson, Arizona. And the thing at the time was that I knew I wanted to be an engineer, mostly because I knew that it was kind of the sweet spot between the pursuit of knowledge and the, pursuit of a career that makes reasonable money. And in some cases, really good money. I wasn't super interested in, pursuing purely science related things, such as going into physics specifically or mathematics or any of those, mostly because I knew that from what I understood about their career prospects, even though they could be like widely applied in some cases, you know, you'd be equipped well to like solve a lot of different types of problems. Engineers, like they kind of have like this sort of career pipeline set up for them already. That's nice compared to what I feel like some scientific fields have, which is like there's a much bigger pressure to, for instance, go to grad school, which at that point I wasn't super sure that I wanted to do. And also, you know, maybe pursue academia after that. Like that's the usually like the big pie in the sky for a lot of like science majors. Anyway, so I decided to apply for the engineering program at U of A. I got in. And then after that, I looked into basically all of U of A's engineering departments, you know, how they ranked, what like those different topics were.
Just to kind of interject there a little bit. You know, you mentioned that you kind of got into it because of your family, your parents. Like, was there any pressure for you to go into engineering? Was it like kind of completely your own decision? Like, did your parents kind of think, hey, you know, this is good for you, let me sign you up for this robotics course? Yeah, was there like any like pressure there? Just curious.
I think that a lot of parents they try to push their kids to do something. It doesn't have to be what they want necessarily, but hopefully it's something productive, I think is often what they think. And like, basically, I think my parents' mindset was like, we want you to do something that makes sure that we don't have to take care of you, in one sense. I don't think there was pressure necessarily towards engineering in particular, but I think like, you know, my mom would have loved for me to be like a doctor or like a famous musician, you know, the usual stuff. And both my brothers had already gone to school for engineering, and like they didn't really love it that much. So she was of the opinion that I probably wouldn't either, based off of that experience with those two. But actually, like we're very different people, and which I guess is to be expected. But they were raised sort of together. They're only about 2 years apart in age, but I'm actually like 9 years apart in age from my nearest brother. So yeah,
Gotcha.
But definitely was there. There was pressure there.
That's really interesting because like Glenn and I both have siblings, and we're the only engineers, and we kind of all did different things. I find it kind of fascinating that all three of you became engineers. Very, very, very cool.
I'm curious about that because with your brothers and your dad or both your parents, it could be like, how much did their choices and their careers like influence yours? Like, would you be able to assign like a weight to that?
I mean, I think my dad was like honestly a pretty huge like influence, mostly because like I was interested in science and he obviously also really liked science. So he like we would do a lot of stuff related to science, and he was like very supportive of me having those interests. And also I want to be clear, like both my brothers like went to school for engineering, but they actually didn't end up becoming engineers. One of them is he's an IT professional who is doing very well for himself. So like definitely like more power to him. And the other one works for the DoD, but he doesn't do engineering for the DoD. He works at I think he works for the airplane graveyard in Tucson, Arizona, which you can look into that if you're interested. But basically it's where the US government keeps a bunch of decommissioned planes. Yeah. But I don't know about the nature of his work there either. Yeah.
Really cool. And if I remember, neither of them ended up in Arizona, right? They all kind of work in different parts of the US now.
My oldest brother still is in Arizona, but the younger of my two older brothers lives in Nebraska, so he went real far away. But he's actually like the only. I mean, me and him were the only ones that went like kind of far away from home, and then everyone else is still back in Arizona, pretty much. Yeah. As for your like original question about how I assign weight, I'd say like. I guess a lot of the science-based stuff it was mostly my dad, and I did a lot of activities with my dad that actually like really encouraged that. There's this company a long time ago before even you or I were probably born or thinking about anything called Heathkit. And basically what they did was they made these electronics kits that were build it yourself. So, you know, you can think of like IKEA furniture, but for like a radio. And it would give you all the instructions. You'd get all the resistors, transistors, capacitors, and you'd get pictorial diagrams and then instructions, and you'd solder everything together, and then it would work. It was amazing. So I did like a lot of those with my dad growing up. And I actually think like that was probably a big part of it too. It's like I have a lot of positive associations with like doing that sort of thing and then like associating it with engineering. Yeah.
Right on. Awesome.
I can't say that I shared that experience, but I could see how that could be so powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, did you have that same camaraderie with people in your cohort when you're going through high school? Like you mentioned the robotics club, like was there like a good community to like help people be like, hey, like we're all applying to engineering, let's see if we can like land together, and like what other things do you want to do as you advance? Like from high school you had like some limitations, and then college you're thinking like what could we do with those resources then? Like was there any, something like that?
Yeah, so I guess I would say not especially. I like most of the friends that I like maintained through high school actually were like not really related at all to like engineering or like engineering stuff. I had met people that had gone to those camps, but a lot of like the kids that went to those just did it because like there wasn't a lot to do in my hometown and it wasn't super expensive. And so it's like, it was a good thing for your kid to do. And for them to like figure out if it was their interests, but like not even all of them like went on to become like engineers. It was just like a thing that they did then. I do know like other people that like were doing engineering at my high school, but I don't really know what they're up to now. I don't keep in contact with a lot of that, to be honest. Yeah. Gotcha. I went to high school in like a very small town of like, 50,000-ish people. And that's like kind of with the surrounding towns. If you just count my town specifically, the population is probably lower than that. So
interesting.
Yeah. It was just like, it's good to have something to do.
In Arizona?
Yeah. It's a town called Sierra Vista, Arizona.
Okay, so you were born and raised in Arizona then, essentially.
I was born and raised in Arizona, yes.
Oh, okay. That's very cool.
Yeah. Glenn and I talked about this in our last episode. Like we're definitely like we discovered engineering much later in life. So actually, we both discovered it in undergrad in college. In like when I was in high school, there wasn't any like engineering club. There wasn't really the main extracurriculars were either sports or like music, like band. And so yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Like going into college, I think for the two of us, it led to a little bit of a like career uncertainty, like career uncertainty of what we wanted to do, because like our high school experience was just like, okay, you got to get straight A's, you got to focus on the classes, and then you get into a good college, and then like once you get into college, that was like my point of discovery. So I didn't know what I really wanted to do up until even like the second or third year of undergrad. So yeah, I think like if I were to kind of think like maybe redo it, or maybe give myself some guidance, like kind of looking back to tell myself from at a younger age, I would have maybe told myself to explore some more like career interests, to like learn more about like these different types of career paths. But yeah, it's interesting to hear that you kind of was exposed to it from such an early age.
Yeah,
very cool.
It wasn't a club at my high school. It was actually like you could take it as there were 4 classes, and you could take one basically like each year, and they were different, all based on like different things. One was like basically digital logic. There was an introductory course, then there was one on like digital logic and electronics. There's another one on like more mechanical topics, and then there's like a final course. And actually, I only took the introductory course at the end of high school because I was taking I was doing a lot of other stuff at the time. But it was still like a really good experience. And also like that teacher at my high school was actually incredible. His name is Mark Goldie, and he was like really good at his job. Like I feel like a lot of engineers came out of that high school literally just because that guy like really loved doing what he did and was really good at it. Actually, he was really good at it. So yeah.
Right on.
I feel
Right
like
on.
that's great. Like I was wondering if you had any like inspirational figures like growing up, and teachers can play a huge role in that. Like if you had a bad teacher, I don't know if you've had any bad teachers, like they could have easily steered people away from that because they're, you know, it's like your introduction to that field, and it's great when you have people that can really inspire you to continue pursuing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like positive role models are really important. They can make a big difference.
Like curious, was there ever any uncertainty like when you're going through, because like when you're applying to school, I think there's a huge pressure. I mean, I know it's probably a while ago for all of us now, but do you still remember like that process? Like were you even considering other possible fields to go into, or other schools?
Yeah, so this one you guys are gonna think is pretty funny actually. I applied to exactly one undergrad program in the United States.
Really? It was just
Just
this, just
just
Arizona,
one.
Tucson,
I
and
just
it was just
applied to
engineering.
one, and
Wow.
Which
it was
which
U of
engineering?
A,
Because
right?
there's sub-disciplines too, like unless it was general engineering.
you have to apply. Well, okay, unless you are admitted into the honors college, which I could have done, but at the time I didn't care. I just wanted to get into college and do my thing. But if you're not admitted into the honors college, then you get admitted into the General College of Engineering, and then
Mhm.
basically what you have to do is you have to take your introductory classes, and you have to have a certain GPA for certain tiers of engineering majors. So
Oh wow.
if you have above blank GPA, then these are the majors you can apply for. It's called gaining advanced standing.
Mhm.
And so you have to do that by like your second year, basically after taking all your classes. Um, so my grades were pretty good after my first year of college. And so optical engineering is like, our optical engineering program at U of A is actually really good. The grad program more so than the undergrad program. That's what they're famous for. But it is a
Mhm.
really good program for undergrads too, I would say. And I had a really good experience. And yeah, so that's what I applied for. Interestingly, optical sciences and engineering at U of A is its own college in addition to an engineering major, which the other engineering majors technically are not. So that also helped with a lot of stuff because them being their own college let them do a lot of things differently from the administrative perspective than other departments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. So you knew you wanted to do optical engineering already when you were applying in high school?
No, I did
Oh.
not. I got into the general engineering program and then I looked into, and there were also presentations on the majors for like the new incoming
Mhm.
engineers. And that was just the one that interested me the most after my first year. It's just that my grades were good enough at the time that I was like, oh, like this sounds the most interesting and like it's unique, and it sounds useful. So like, I'm going to try it. So here I
Wow.
am.
And the school had a good reputation for it, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah. There
Something
were only a
to
few. Oh, sorry.
no, no, good, good. Yeah, it's
I
just
just
something to take advantage of as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like there are only a few programs for optical engineering, like specifically in the US. So it is actually like a pretty niche field in that respect because normally it falls under the umbrella of applied physics in most schools, or or electrical engineering, also very common for optical engineering to fall. And you'll see a lot of optical engineers in electrical engineering departments across the US.
Mhm.
But for like specific departments, there's one at U of A, there's like one at University of Rochester in New York. There's like a smaller one in, I think, University of Central Florida for like photonics. So like there's a few of them, but they're not like common. So I was like, oh, like this one's here and I want to be an engineer. So I
Mhm.
might as well. Like, yeah.
Wasn't there also like some sort of telescope, if I'm remembering wrong, or at the U of A, wasn't there some sort of like optical equipment that uh they're famous for having? Is it the Stewart Observatory,
No, they're,
the giant Magellan telescope?
yes, the
The
Giant Magellan Telescope. So the Giant Magellan Telescope has 7 mirror segments and all of them are like, I think, like either 4 or 6 meters wide in diameter. So you can imagine these are massive mirrors. They're like absolutely giant. Um,
Mhm.
and so you can't just make those anywhere. You need a lot of specialized equipment. And in addition, like they have to be basically like perfect in terms of optical constants for a telescope that big. Um, and it's hard to do that consistently unless you have a lot of expertise focused in one place. So under the like football stadium at U of A, basically, there's a giant mirror lab that they use to grind these giant mirrors for telescopes like that. Yeah.
Right on. Cool.
Oh, that's
Cool.
very interesting.
Yeah, it's super cool. I would actually, I think they do tours. If you're ever in Arizona and you're actually interested, you can look it up. They do tours of the telescope, like mirror grinding facility, and you can see what the whole process is like. It's very involved and it takes a very long time. I think grinding a single mirror takes like, I don't know, something like 3 to 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So
That's
so
like PhD's worth of grinding.
yeah, and like all the precision engineering involved. Yeah, that's crazy.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess we walk through kind of high school, undergrad, and then as we know, when you went to grad school, you at some point made a shift and decided to go towards material science. Um, I guess before we go into that, Glenn, did you have any more questions about like maybe like the undergrad parts?
I mean, maybe this is not a point to focus in on, but how much confidence do you have? Because you played at one school, like, and all the rest of the season, like, you just like you had that much confidence, or were you just that sure that this is the only place that you feel like you'd want to go? Like, what motivated you? Or I guess how did you reason out just this one school, and then I'm not going to apply anywhere else? Because I find that interesting.
I didn't reason it out. I was in high school and I wasn't very smart, and my parents didn't stop me. But also both my brothers had gotten into U of A and my grades were at least as good as theirs. So I wasn't super worried about it. My standardized test scores were like really good and everything, which didn't mean I was a shoo-in by like any means. But yeah, I also, at that point in my life, like I hadn't really ever been too far away from home and I didn't really want to start at that time. I don't think I was like ready for it.
I see. Okay. Now that makes sense.
So like Tucson is like like University of Arizona is like a tier 1 accredited research school. It is a state school, but it's definitely like no slacker, especially in like certain fields of scientific research. So like I didn't really feel like I was compromising. Also from the perspective of money, like I definitely would have gone to an in-state school.
Right.
Okay.
Just because like, yeah. And the scholarship offer that I got from U of A was also like really good. Like,
oh, nice.
It made things a lot
Oh,
easier.
yeah. Nice.
So,
That's
right
awesome.
on, right on. Yeah.
So yeah, those are all the things. I mean, yeah.
I guess like when you went through your undergrad, like how was your like mental health and all that? Like how was your like work-life balance and that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, in college, I think I was a pretty chronic procrastinator, like up through high school and even like through college. I think that habit really only changed with grad school because it's like on a project timeline scale, it makes a much bigger difference to get started early. Like it will save you a lot of headaches if you figure out problems early. But in undergrad, that wasn't necessarily true most of the time because a lot of like stuff that you did wasn't, at least in my program, wasn't project-based work. It was like assignment-based work. And so you could afford to wait until like 2 or 3 nights before to start the homework. And then, yeah, just stay up really late all the time. So I would actually say like in terms of number of hours I worked compared to the number of hours that I just like messed around in college, the work-life balance was actually like really good. It's just that like I dealt with it in like a very unhealthy way just because I was not a great time manager at that point.
Right. I think it's that phase in life was almost like a critical point for you to learn some of that, like learn the responsibility. Because like it's so long ago for me now. I mean, to put it into perspective, undergrad was I finished undergrad in 2013, 2012. It's over 10 years ago. But I remember going from high school and then going to undergrad. You have all this freedom, and then just having all this freedom. For me, like from my parents, I got to like live in the dorms, and like that was great. That was great. But at the same time, it kind of building that sense of responsibility to like not like to maintain good grades and all that. That was an important learning lesson for me. And really like I don't think I really like really developed a really clear work ethic. Like it didn't really click for me until my junior and my senior years. Interestingly, I think a lot of people their grades usually start off strong and they taper down because classes get harder. And I actually went like the opposite. I think like the first few years, I like focused on like the social aspects. It was like, like I'm in a new environment. I sit to somebody on the bus that I haven't met to before. I'm going to introduce myself and hey, how's it going? I'm going to try to like make friends with everybody. And then like, okay, after I settle in a couple quarters in, it's like, okay, I gotta get my shit down. I gotta get my shit down and, like get good grades. And so I could, pump up that GPA and get into a good grad school or find a good job or whatever. But yeah. Oh, good times. Good times.
So throughout your undergrad, were there any setbacks, whether it be hard classes, difficult people, self, improvement, or any doubts in like, what am I going to do after I graduate? Because I think those are things that I thought about constantly. Even to some degree, even today, like, what am I doing? Where's this leading to? So I think for engineering, like definitely people, it was a huge dropout rate and people switch majors. Did you ever experience anything like that where you're unhappy or had any setbacks like that?
I mean, I guess there's like stuff happening in my personal life at the end of college. Like I had basically like broken up with a girl at the time. And that affected me, but I'd say like in terms of like worrying about whether or not I'd be successful in college overall wasn't something that I thought about a lot. My mindset, like in college, was always like, do the next day. Like basically, I take things one day at a time. And like when I started undergrad, my only thoughts were, okay, like there's really only two things you have to do to get what you paid for out of your education. One is you have to show up to class. So even if I was literally falling asleep in class, I would show up to class like clockwork. And the other was do your homework. That was it. Like I showed up to class and I did my homework. And like the exams, like obviously since I showed up to class, I was there and I did my homework. And honestly, like the homework that they assign you, very helpful for basically just passing a class. Like it's more for your benefit than it is for the professors, literally every time, because it just makes more work for them. I think in terms of like the worrying about success, though, I think a big thing for me that really helped was that my cohort for my optics undergrad major was actually like very small, which doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing, but I'm a pretty sociable person. So you were asking about this in regards to high school, about like if there's a cohort of people. In college, there were, by the time things kicked into full swing, so sophomore year, a few people basically like dipped, but after that, this class size stayed pretty consistent, but there were only like 30 people in my graduating optics class, which you guys know what college majors can be like there will literally be like, I don't know, like hundreds of biology students that will graduate in a given year generally.
Yeah.
So like only 30 is like, you literally know every single person in your class. Like, their names, like, more than a little bit about them. And also like, I'd say our class is actually like very friendly. So like, it was a very supportive environment to go through school in, because a lot of times like just a whole bunch of people in our class would just get together and bang out homework. Like nice. We'd figure things out. Like we teach each other stuff. Like it was a very positive, healthy environment to learn things in. And also like you had this whole thing of encouragement, because obviously in any class, there's going to be like a distribution of people who are very type A all the way to the distribution of people who are very type B, which I felt like I fell into the latter camp basically. And so like having those other people around to just say, like, we should start it. We should like look at the problem set at least and like do a problem or two. It was instrumental in just making sure that like basically I got stuff done all the time, every time. Was just like
Oh yeah.
those people being around to be like, we should just work on this for a little bit. And then it feels a lot less bad because you're doing it with somebody else. Like the suffering is shared.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I guess I also kind of had a similar experience where um, I had a group of friends in engineering in undergrad, and that I met through a club called Dragon Boat. I don't know if you heard of Dragon Boat, but like it's like this. It's a water sport. It's like a water sport extracurricular. But anyways, they weren't the most studious. They weren't the most studious, and then at some point, like during school, I kind of associated myself with like the more studious crowd, and it was night and day. It was very very night and day. Like just in terms of like the habits, the approach to doing homeworks, and yeah, I mean, you surround yourself with hardworking people, with good people. I think that's in some ways you're gonna learn a lot. You're gonna learn a lot. It's gonna help you grow, and yeah, yeah. I think that's important. But for me, that was kind of, I don't want to call it like a life-changing experience, but it was pretty impactful because I think if I kept sticking around that other group, um, and like number one, I don't think I would have learned anything. Like it's good to like bounce ideas and have somebody to talk to, and have people that kind of help push you like towards some sort of goal or whatnot. Um, until you eventually you become that person that pushes other people. And yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess pro tip there is go to the library, or don't go out and do extracurriculars if you have something you gotta finish. Be around the people that are gonna
or even just like diversify. I don't know.
Mm.
But
yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm.
Like yeah, diversify. I mean, like I did homework with like so many different people throughout undergrad. Like it's just literally just like make a fast friend. Like if you're in a class and you don't know what's going on, like make a fast friend. Like just be like, I mean, you got to obviously be willing to put in the effort to learn and stuff, but like generally people are very receptive to people who are seeking help. However that may come, as long as you're like actually putting in the effort to like show up and not just, essentially like profit off of their hard work without doing any of your own. Like generally people are like they're very willing to be forthcoming with like helping you. At least that was my experience in undergrad, because like everybody's just trying to graduate. And another thing is for them, like it's generally beneficial for them too, because they're like, oh, like I get more mastery over whatever I'm like talking to you about. So it's useful for me as long as you're going to actually listen. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's a sentiment that I've heard like mirrored by several different people. The perspectives on that is shared, and it speaks to that fact. Like I was going to ask you, like, what are some principles, and that's already one really good one, which is you have that discipline to like just show up every day. Because if you're not in class, not only are you not going to meet people, you don't get the material, then you have to ask people, and then that just feels more annoying. Like if someone's like, hey, like what did you guys do today? Oh, what was the assignment? Do you have the homework? Can I see your homework? It's like you don't feel like it's shared, where you're just giving everything for free. And I too feel like that becomes annoying when it becomes frequent too. Like this person's not going to contribute much, but if you do happen to miss something and you've contributed to this group before, then obviously people are going to be there to hold, like, give you support when you need help too. So like it's a pretty good ecosystem if you can set up like your own dependency, like your routine. So showing up, I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the thing that people often overlook. Like people are like, oh, we ditched class today. We went to like the beach, right? Like in college, like you're gonna get a lot of opportunities to do that. And it takes a lot of like mental will or like social pressure to like be able to like say no to some groups, because you feel like, hey, you don't want to be ostracized, you don't want to be excluded from what's happening that other people are experiencing too, like FOMO. So
yeah, I get that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, good on you.
I tried.
And it's another thing you mentioned that you consider yourself type B, but one of the people that stood out to me, like, so we all met for the first time at the UCLA grad school, like, what was it, like, orientation, right? Because
Yeah.
at that time, people are shopping around. Both universities are looking for, their pool of candidates, but each candidate most likely applied to multiple grad schools. And I'm guessing you also this time applied to multiple grad schools and instead of just one. But you actually stood out to me as someone who was who had a lot of confidence and a lot of courage, and you're very charismatic. And still to this day, I feel like you were one of the most charismatic people I've met in grad school, because you're one of the things that I really admire, even in classroom setting, but this is orientation, is that if someone stands up and asks a question that everyone's thinking of, like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, that, thank you for asking that, because maybe I would have just like let it go, and then I would have like less ability to figure this out later. So you ask great questions, and I felt like you actually did give some leadership and like trying to organize some good discussions. So you actually stood out to me when I was considering different groups and different people. Like I was excited to see you again after orientation, because I mean, obviously we didn't know each other then, but to see you in grad school, that was a great pleasure. So I'm really glad that you're part of my cohort.
Thank you. That's like honestly like so flattering. I didn't try to do that, so I just showed up and did my thing. But I like honestly it was really great. Yeah, meeting you too. I mean, like I didn't know you at the time, but like I think we like clicked pretty fast. Like honestly, once we actually met, like it was pretty quick. Yeah, like I totally feel like the same way. Like I don't know. I think you're a great dude.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are quite similar. Like there is maybe a sense of certain types of characters, certain types of similar goals and values, which would lead multiple people to the same path. Like going to grad school is a pretty small subset of people in my cohort of graduating students, and I guess maybe that's why people have some similar personalities and stuff like that. So I mean, I feel like a lot of people in our whole cohort, like I feel like they're all great people. They're people I click with, and so it's not like it was uncommon to meet somebody that I liked. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Anyways, leading to grad school, Chris. Yeah, continue with your other questions.
Yeah, so just to kind of keep it here moving a little bit. Yeah, so okay, I guess going into grad school, I think we've had a lot of conversations among ourselves, but just curious, like what your journey, some key struggles, like if you would like to share some of that. What was that like for you, first of all? Just the I guess what made you decide to go to grad school? I guess first of all, I'm more curious, did anyone in your family also go to grad school? How that decision came about, first of all, and then like after you made that decision, I kind of want to get to what that experience was like, and what challenges you met along the way.
Yeah, so like on the way into grad school, or like how I made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so both of my parents have graduate degrees. My mother has a PhD in education, and my dad has a master's degree in computer science and a master's degree in physics.
Wow.
Yeah, they weren't slackers, I guess. They did all right. And I don't know if that like really like influenced my decision, like the fact that they'd gone to grad school. Like I didn't really think about that playing into like whether or not I should go. At the time that I applied to grad school, the biggest reason that I was doing it was sort of to cover my bases. So let me tell you what I mean by that is like, as a new grad, you have a lot of opportunities, and like some of them might not be good, even if they're presented. And so the idea for me was, and also I'd done research in undergrad. This is another like important component of this topic, but I'd done research in undergrad. I had talked to grad students in my research lab, mostly PhD students in my research lab, as well as like my research professor. And then I also went ahead and talked to like other professors about grad school too, that I like, you know, had a lot of respect for and felt comfortable like asking frank questions too about like what the experience was like. And so when I graduated, I applied to jobs at a lot of places, and I also applied to like four grad schools. Yeah, 4 grad schools. Yeah. And the idea was, oh, I'll apply to all these places. If I get into someplace really good for a job, then I don't mind just taking a job right out of like undergrad. That could be cool. And then, but if not, like I have all these grad schools, hopefully one of them will take me. And as a last resort, sort of, U of A, I knew would probably like admit me. Like there was a very high chance that they would admit me into their grad program for that program. So I wasn't super worried on that front. And I knew that that would actually be an awesome opportunity if nothing else turned up. The third and final part of this was that my current girlfriend, who I met at the very end of undergrad, sort of, she was applying to a bunch of schools as well. And it was really crazy. I think about it now, like how crazy this was. I was having this line of thought because at this point we'd maybe been dating for like 3.5 months, but I was like, sure. I was like, man, like, this is amazing. Like, I need to do whatever I possibly can to make this work. And so like, I tried to apply to like a lot of opportunities in California itself, because I knew there was a high likelihood that she would be there. Yeah. And so all those things put together, no really good job opportunities came through, and I was admitted to 2 graduate institutions. One of them was UCLA, the other one was U of A, my alma mater. And basically my thoughts at the time were like, maybe it's time for something new. Like, you've been living in Arizona your whole life. Like, it's time to meet new people. It's time to have like a new exciting opportunity. It's time to see like how you can perform in like a weird, different environment away from everyone you know. You know, there's definitely an element of personal growth. And then also is like, and you get to be closer to like this person. So like, hopefully everything will work out. That was the idea.
Right. Gotcha.
Love is a great motivator. I totally like relate to that.
Completely understandable. Yeah. I was kind of the same way too. I had a choice to continue on in my undergrad university in Irvine, and for basically the exact same reasons you mentioned, like personal growth, like a new environment, and you know, on pen and paper, you know, UCLA was a you know, better ranked university or whatever. I kind of took that leap of faith and went to a different school as well. Yeah, I knew a lot of people like at UCI that actually continued on and did a PhD at the exact same university, and I always found that like kind of interesting. Like wouldn't you want to, you know, go someplace else? But I guess to each their own. But yeah, no, really cool, very cool. So you get into UCLA. I guess why I guess because UCLA doesn't have materials. It doesn't have an optics program, right? So like, what was the logic there? Like, why materials? Why not like physics, or which may relate a little more to optics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in undergrad, I minored in material science, and actually my material science GPA was a unweighted perfect 4.0, which, not to flex, but I thought I was pretty good at it. Like, it was like to me, like material science made sense, and like I'd gone into optics and I'd stuck with it, but my optics program basically had like tracks, and so like you could do an electronics track, you could do a material science track, or you could do a mechanical track. And then there's also like a custom track where you could like combine some other stuff and put stuff together. I decided to do the materials track. They have like, course outlines for all of these tracks on like, here's what an example course load would look like. And the reason that I did that was because my sophomore year, instead of taking Gen Chem 2, I decided to take solid state chemistry, which was like one of the substitutions you were allowed to make. And so I took that like solid state chemistry course. I had this very, very interesting professor named Nicholas Swintek, who was a very young guy at the time. And he was like a pretty good teacher, and the labs for that class were really interesting. So at the time I was like, all right, like maybe I should check this out. Like maybe I should see what like material science is all about. And so basically like I ended up taking more courses in that track, and like doing a lot more of it and really enjoying it. So at that point, like I already had that minor in material science. And when I went to grad school, since I knew that I would have to go someplace I didn't really want to go in order to be in a optical science program, if I wanted to like be in California, then I'd have to switch gears. But also like I had a genuine interest in material science. And I thought that the like cross-disciplinary expertise could be useful. A lot of problems now, and I'm sure like you guys know this better than anyone, especially like working in real companies, like a lot of problems now that are interesting, you can't really solve with a single field's expertise anymore. Like you need a lot of different experts talking about a lot of very complex topics in order to make a very complex and useful idea come to fruition. And so like, in some ways, like obviously like breadth is good, but also like depth is important. And so to me, this was like a good way to basically have a very good mix of both. Having an entire undergrad education in optics, like I think prepared me pretty well for understanding optics in general. And then, my grad degree in material science, honestly, like it's taught me a lot about material science, but I've gotten to do a lot of interesting optics work related to materials because of that. And so like, yeah, that's what I'll say about it.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Especially at the grad school level, like I think you brought up kind of almost an interesting point, is kind of a separation of the opportunities that like research gave us and what like the formal curriculum kind of gave us.
Yeah.
Because I think we were in a very interesting case where we were part of a lab with a brand new professor, kind of starting almost a brand new area of research for the whole university, which I think gave us a lot of opportunities, and it gave us a lot of challenges as well. And yeah, like we may not use everything that we have learned in class, but like the research itself, I think, gave us a lot of interesting opportunities. And like learning more about optics was one of those interesting things that you touched on a little bit. But yeah, anywho, so I guess yeah, kind of branching off of that, like after getting into grad school, what were what was that like? What was that like for you? Like starting grad school, and what were some of the highs, some of the lows, things like that?
Yeah. Getting into grad school was crazy. Like getting the letter from UCLA saying that I got into UCLA, like was crazy. It was crazy. Like I was losing my mind after I got the letter. I was like, there's no way. Because I didn't think that I had like, I don't know. I didn't think I had an Ice Cube's chance in hell of like getting in basically. And so like, because of that, yeah, like that was very exciting. There's definitely like bittersweet like aspects of it too, though, because like it's still pretty far away from where I knew like Alyssa would be going to school. So yeah, but like it was amazing. It was crazy. I mean, obviously like there's a lot of pressure during that time when you're like waiting for letters to come through. So like seeing an acceptance, yeah, that was huge. Like it was amazing. And like I think you guys probably like feel similarly, like getting that letter in the mail and being like, oh, like you're in the program, probably felt pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the one of the most stressful things was finding out whether or not like we would have funding,
Yeah.
and that was a pain in the butt. But I think it's a situation that a lot of people run into. It's a valid concern that a lot of
Yeah.
students have, and yeah.
Yeah. I think aside from that, like there's definitely like a lot of trepidation because I'd never lived like away. Like I lived away from home, but my hometown is only an hour and a half away driving from my home, from like where I went to college. So
Right.
like if anything ever went wrong, you know, I could basically just call my parents up and be like, hey, like I need help. And yeah, like they'd be around. And so like moving to California at first was just like, it was like a wild thought because it's like I've never been basically away from Arizona for any extended period of time. I wasn't really like afraid because like I was excited for something new. It was just like, whoa, like this is like a big step in life. Like this is going to be a little different. And yeah, so that was cool. Moving sucked. Moving always sucks. You guys know that. But yeah, like overall, I'd say it was like a really good experience. Lots of new stuff, you know, getting to really experience the campus and like really experience LA for the first few, like, I don't know, weeks, which at the time I actually like really kind of hated at first because coming from Tucson, it's like very different. But like after having lived here for a while, like I actually really like LA. Aside from, you know, the economics of LA, like I love LA as a city and like there's so much to do and it's amazing. And I've gotten I've gotten over a lot of things that I originally had problems with. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Very cool. There's one thing that you guys mentioned, funding. And John, I feel like you have some great experience with that. Like, what advice would you give to people in trying to secure funding?
I guess I'm not a good person to ask because I didn't secure funding my first year. Because
Not your first year, but you know, you're a winner of a pretty prestigious scholarship. So
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think a big part of it was having like this isn't advice, but like I don't know, I consider myself lucky in a lot of ways, of course. Like a lot of what happens to you is luck. And that's just like a reality of the world is like some people are going to be luckier than you. And some people are going to be less lucky than you. But I think like the things that really like contributed to me being able to like secure that funding afterwards, the first one was my professor basically being like so super supportive about making sure that I was paid. Like if Dr. Rahman had been here earlier and he had known about me earlier, I have no doubt that like he would have made sure that like my funding was secure, that he had a grant or something that he could pay me with initially while I was like working on the other stuff. Like he would have figured that out for sure. For like for the funding itself, I think it's just like, you know, keep your eye out for opportunities. And I think the biggest thing is like, you got to play to win, basically. Like, I think a lot of people, and me especially, like I do often like have this mindset, but like, at the time I was just like, I need to do it. I need to try at least. Even though generally I'm in the mindset that maybe like, maybe I shouldn't try. Like, I'm not going to get it. So like, why should I try going for this thing? I don't feel qualified to receive this award or whatever it may be. And I think my biggest advice would be like, ignore that voice in your head that tells you that you shouldn't do the thing because you don't think you will get it. Because I've been wrong twice. Like,
no, your stories. I mean, it's an inspirational one to me. I mean, like, I guess for those who don't know, just kind of go into a little bit into the background, but like, the way funding at the graduate school level is supposed to work is I don't know if other universities do this differently, but at least this is the way that UCLA does it in our department. Is they'll fund you for the first year. They'll fund you for the first year, and then the subsequent years of your grad school program, it's up to you to find that funding. So whether it's through applying for fellowships, you getting a research fellowship from your professor, or you can get supported through TA-ships. So that's kind of a couple of ways that you can get funded. But in principle, on pen and paper, a PhD student is supposed to be funded in principle. And in many cases, like I've been to conferences and have talked to students from other universities, from Princeton, Caltech. Things can go wrong sometimes, and like one of the things that can go wrong is that a professor could leave. A professor could leave to another university, and that could completely screw over the student. So his funding pool has suddenly evaporated, has suddenly expired. If his professor was funding him, and then it's kind of up to him to find his own opportunity. And like in many ways, the first few years of grad school, I think the ideal scenario is if like professor and student has a perfect one-to-one match, and a lot of it also depends on whether the professor himself has funding. So sometimes you want to work with the professor. Hey, professor, I'm really interested in your work. I want to work for you. Here's my background. I think I'm the perfect fit. But they can be like, oh well, I just hired a student. I don't have any more funding. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. So yeah, funding is a big point of stress for a lot of students in the PhD program, and like especially with the high cost of living in LA.
Yeah.
That kind of definitely compounds to the stress. So yeah, I think like in our cohort, there were a handful of students that didn't receive funding for the first year. Some students did receive funding, and I don't think that completely. I don't think that should have ever happened in the department. I really disagree with the way that they did things there. But I think they're taking actions to make sure that doesn't happen ever again. But I mean, like it's you mentioned it that you weren't funded the first year, but I just find it so inspirational that I can imagine that like that probably put a lot of stress on you, right? Like kind of being in your position, I can just only imagine like the amount of stress that you were under, and also being able to kind of climb yourself out of that situation, so to speak, and not only did you secure funding, but like the NSF fellowship is again, it is the funding to get.
Yeah.
It is. So anyways, again, I find that kind of like just very inspirational, and just kind of like you said, I think you're being humble. You mentioned that luck was involved, but I definitely think it was more than that.
And I think I've heard this thing before too. You can even apply for these scholarships when you're in undergrad, and you can get it before you even get admitted to other schools. And that you could use to like basically advertise yourself to different professors. Because as a professor, if I'm picking a student, hey, this student has funding with him, like that's free money for the professor. He's like, why not? This kid's got funding. He can help. Like he can basically cover himself, and he can help get things that we need for the lab. Like that becomes such an easy decision for a professor. Now, getting that early requires you to have like that much early investment. You have to have been, doing research early in your undergrad. If you get lucky enough, have things published or be a co-author on some papers.
Right.
And working with big name professors in that field definitely goes a long way, since the community of people researching that very niche topic is smaller and smaller, where everyone almost knows each other as competitors or as allies, but they know each other. So having your name associated with other people, like it helps you a lot in trying to recognize you, especially if you don't know you in person and just a name on a paper. So some advice there. Don't know exactly how you would go about that, but if you can get that locked in earlier, the less burden it is later on in your career. So yeah, I mean, what are some of the things about the application process that you've learned? Like, are there any like nuggets of wisdom that you might give anybody who is applying to that now, who's in that kind of early grad school or considering grad school, or even to your earlier self, if you could go back in time, what would you say?
Oh, about the NSF in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the NSF application process focuses on, there's a few components. The first component is basically essentially a declaration of the type of research that you're planning to do. So it's basically a research plan. The second document is a personal statement. And then the other documents are letters of recommendation from, prominent people that can speak on your behalf. And so the application overall is trying to address two general merit criterion. The first one is intellectual merit, and the second one is broader impacts. For all of the people that might be watching this, those concepts, like, you really need to understand them because they're basically the rubric for your entire application. Intellectual merit is what it sounds like. It's what is the intellectual merit of you as a person, but also of the research that you are trying to perform, and like how can it affect science more positively. Basically, how can it like help our understanding of the world? The usual stuff. The thing that you would associate a scientist with. What are you going to do for science? Broader impacts is the other stuff. What are you going to do for not science? What are you going to do for, like, what are you personally going to do for the world that isn't related to your scientific career? What things have you already done that aren't related to basically like research science? Like, how have you personally tried to impact people's lives more positively aside from what you contribute scientifically? So those things. The biggest tip that I guess the biggest tips that I have, the first one is that have as many people as you can read all of your relevant application materials that you have access to. So your personal statement and your research proposal, have a lot of people read those. Like, literally anyone that you are close to, that you trust, like, reading those, because like every set of comments you get are like, even if you don't decide to accept their feedback, is going to give you new perspective on the way that somebody who's looking at your application with completely fresh eyes is going to react to it. Obviously, like, the people who are reviewing your application, they're generally real subject matter experts in whatever topic that you're applying for. And so, they are a very niche subset of people. That said, one of the most important things about your application is how well it captures interest. And that is something that can be tested on anyone. So it's obviously good to have lots of other people. If if you have friends that have a background in what you're applying for, it's obviously great to have them read it because their comments are going to be really impactful on the content itself, like the basis of what you're writing down, like what holes or flaws might be able to be exposed and like in your research proposal, or things that you could cover better in your personal statement if they know you very well. And those are things you only are going to figure out or only going to hear about if you get people to read it and tell you about it. So I had both of my brothers read it. Like, I had a whole bunch of my friends read it. I had my girlfriend read it. I had like my professor, Dr. Raman, who's my professor currently, I had him read it. And I got comment and feedbacks from all those people. And also at UCLA, there's a graduate writing center. And you can actually set up appointments with them for you to read your NSF essays and grade them. And the writing center actually employs people who have gotten it or have been like honorable mentioned by it. So like they have the credentials to tell you like, oh, like my application made it. Here's what my application materials look like. Like, you can read through them too if you want. and then they'll also give you feedback on it. So that's super useful.
Nice.
The second tip I would say is that your application package is a package. So that sounds dumb, but the idea is every single part of your application, it's a part of this bigger picture, right? And so you need to treat it that way. Like everything in your research proposal, if possible, where possible, you want as much of the contents of your application to be connected into a cohesive package as possible. So, you're talking about your research proposal, whatever you're talking about, like you might want to mention how you got that interest in your personal statement, or like what qualifies you, or like what personal experiences you have. For me, even like with letters of recommendation, like some of the people that I asked for letters of recommendation were like, oh, like you can read this letter of recommendation beforehand, and then you can like tell me if there's anything about it that you want me to try and highlight more about your experience. And so like when that happened, I had already had my personal statement ready, and I was like, oh, like this is the part of my personal statement that you were personally involved with. Like, can you speak more about that aspect of your connection to me? Because then this small part of my personal statement is going to be able to be expanded upon in your letter of recommendation, in addition to like the other things that you're saying about me. Like, oh, I read this line in this, and this person who has like real credentials is saying, oh, he really did that. Like he did those things, he was good at them. Like you should nominate him for this award. So that's another big thing. Like you should think of your application as like a cohesive package. You should make sure that it tells like a story overall, all of your application materials taken together, because that's going to be a lot more impactful than a bunch of these little pieces that are disconnected from each other, talking about separate things.
Right. You don't want to talk about your research on how you're building solar sails, and go talk to your boss, part-time job at Wendy's, and ask him for a recommendation.
Yeah, exactly.
He may say, okay, yeah, John's a hard worker, but like you said, I think that cohesiveness could help a little bit.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm gathering a second principle here, which is like really focus on building strong relationships with the people there. So build a community of people that not only are you supporting them, because just like you're trying to apply to this, I'm sure you had several other friends too that were also applying at the same time. And now while you are somewhat competing, I mean, typically you can have multiple people from the same institution, even within the same lab group. I mean, it's not like it's unheard of. Like you can both win. But I mean, the idea is you want to support each other. I mean, this only helps your network. If they get it, they can also help you. Like it's not something where like they won and then, I mean, they're taking funding away from you. So that network is only going to help you because you're both getting help. You're both getting that perspective on feedback. And that's what really helps. It's like feedback from as more people, the better. And that building strong relationship with your professors, like that letter of rec sounds like it's a huge make or break, because if two people had identical everything else, is that letter of rec can not only like enhance the material in there, but also give credibility to who you are. So I mean that's a huge part.
Yeah,
don't burn your bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as far as like, and I mean this goes for any application in general, but for the NSF it's especially important because there's no interview for the NSF. You don't get a chance to show if you're personable. They don't care. Like it doesn't matter if they're never going to meet you in person. So everything you are, it has to be on paper. If it's not, they don't know about it. And like a part of that, yeah, like just like you said, is like your recommendation letters. So that I like, actually, like I think that's where the biggest part of your personableness will come through, is in your letters of recommendation, is what other people are going to say about your work ethic, your ability to perform research, and like generally like who you are as a person. Like are you a terrible human being, or like are you like somebody who like cares, who wants to like make a difference, right? Like those are the sorts of things that like you hope will come through in a letter of recommendation, because you can't present those thoughts to whoever is going to be rating your application during the process. Yeah, definitely. Like relationships, absolutely. And I think that's honestly just more broadly applicable. Like maintaining relationships throughout your academic and professional career will only serve to enrich you, not only based on like the friendships that you get from those people, but like also professionally, which is like, I think personally a nice side effect. Like, I mean, I'm friends with people first, obviously, because I want to hang out with them. But like, if we happen to be in a professional context where I can help them or they can help me, like having a good relationship with them makes me want to try harder to make their situation better. And it's going to be that way for anyone, right? So, yeah.
I mean, that's actually one quality of yours that I really admire. I think within engineering, now I think it's not uncommon, but you've probably met some people who have big egos and maybe aren't willing to have that supportive relationship with you for whatever reasons. I mean, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but what are some of the ways that you personally try to build those relationships? Like, how do you try to enhance just enhance that camaraderie with your cohort?
Yeah. I guess within my lab, like specifically, I mean, I think that I will try to procrastinate sometimes on my own projects if I know that I can help somebody else out, like with my time. And that's something that like I, in general, really try not to back down from, even if I'm like have deadlines and stuff that I'm working on. Like if someone says, hey, like, can you help me with this thing? Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm almost like guaranteed to say yes to them. And like if they're in the lab and like they need help with something and I have the ability to like make their life easier, like I'll do it. Even if it's like at the cost of like basically my own valuable time that I might like actually need to do something, especially if it's research related, mostly because like, we all have different expertise. And a lot of the times, like somebody who knows a lot about a topic, their perspective on something, it can save you personally, like hours of your life for them to just be able to give you a clear answer quickly. Especially when you're navigating other types of relationships, like the one with your professor. I think this is something that grad students probably think about often, is like, how does my professor perceive me? Do they think that I'm dumb? Like, I don't want them to think that I'm dumb. So like, I always think it's nice, at least within the lab, to, if I have a question that I know will sound stupid, if I ask it to like my professor, then if I ask someone else about it and they'll just be like, oh yeah, like it's just this, like, they're not going to judge me for it. And like, he doesn't need to know that, like, maybe I didn't know the answer right away. Right. So yeah, that's a big thing I'll say, I think, is like, just if somebody asks for help or like takes the time to reach out to you because they genuinely like would like to hear your opinion on something, like just taking the time out of your day to help them, like that makes a big difference to a lot of people, like in that moment, especially because again, you can save them a lot of time and hopefully like help them gain new understanding a lot quicker than if they were just like hammering away at the problem themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this applies to non-technical things too, like reflecting on some of our conversations in grad school. Some of it's just like emotional stress, personal stress. I mean, we're going through a lot of things financially, the stress of, man, the classes are much harder in grad school too. I mean, that first class, solid state physics, I mean, that's no joke. I mean, you have a very short period of time, especially on a quarter system, if you're not familiar with it. I know that's a struggle for a lot of people, but just having people to just release like all that frustration, that tension inside, and then, like you said, dissipate that suffering, because it's a lot if you just try to take it all on your own and you don't have a good your own way to regulate that yourself. But if you have a community and when someone else shares that same pain and you're there to just listen and like just talk them through that, I feel like that goes a long way. Because I remember like everyone has their own personal struggles, and I remember chatting with you, chatting with several other people, like that helps tremendously. And being generous, it breeds reciprocation. Like you helping somebody else means they're more willing to help you too. And I don't know how you like develop that habit, but I think empathy like is something that can be practiced. So Anyways, that's a random tangent.
I think it's like related. Like it is like, I mean, networking is going to be important for the rest of your life. It's good to be able to make an impact, and I think like genuinely wanting to help people obviously helps. But like, even if you're not the type to like generally do that, like it's never going to be a waste of your time if you have the time to invest into another person. Like it can help you out in your 11th hour. You never know. You just
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Windows brownie points.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess
All
another
right.
thing, just a last thing on that topic is that I think another thing that probably I'd say to both of you guys is that don't be judgmental. Like everyone has their own struggles and everyone has their own standards, but I think you guys did a good job of like when you feel comfortable with people, it's like when people aren't there to like criticize you all the time. And I don't think it's a good place to always have that critical stuff about each other when you're all struggling through things. And so I think that's a good quality to have, something that I admire in both of you guys. So anyways,
Right on. Alrighty. Well, I didn't mean to go a little bit over, but you have anything you want to ask us?
Oh
Um,
man.
oh yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing is um, like how different is the career from like grad school? And I know you have a lot of experience with this, especially. Um, I guess both of you have like had jobs now, but Chris, like you went into industry like right after undergrad first, and then came back, right?
mhm, yeah.
And so like you have a lot of experience about like basically what the real working world is like. Because I've only really interned, but like as a full timer,
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that. I'm actually curious I'm also kind of curious what your most recent experience working was. But sorry, go ahead. If you finish your question.
yeah, I was just curious about like what it's like to be like a full-time employee, I guess now with your degree, like both of you, like what is that like? Like how has it affected your mental health? What is it like in terms of like work-life balance? Is it what you expected? Is it better? Is it worse? Like, were there any unexpected things that have come up as a result of it? Yeah,
Mhm.
just speak on that.
So on my side, um, yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack there. So I guess my career path was I did undergrad and then I went into industry and I went to industry for a fairly long time, for like 5 years, which was longer than my college education. So that was a very eye-opening experience for me. Just I and overall I had a very positive experience, which I'm grateful for. It taught me to kind of think a little differently, because it was in product development. We made software, and in undergrad I did projects and stuff, but it was like one big team project, one big permanent team project working on improving a single product. And then, there were disagreements with people. People have conflicting ideas, kind of like in school. And then you kind of have to learn how to navigate through that. You learn how to navigate through the technical challenges. Um, but it was very different from school in the sense that, like, I mean, up until then, like my personal school experience was okay, like you gotta study, you gotta do exams, and that kind of thinking is very different from the kind of quote unquote thinking you need to do in the quote unquote real world. Like in the real world, there's no solution manual, there's no, like, sometimes like studying or doing the homework, like doing the mental exercises, that may not be what the company is looking for. Typically you're trying to solve some sort of problem almost. So that was kind of a really big culture shock, not culture shock for me, but one that I was really good at. One was because and I told Glenn this in the last episode, but like I wasn't I didn't have like horrible grades, but I wasn't like a stellar student either. Like I actually I didn't like have the patience to study. Like I didn't like grinding out homework assignments. And one can say that, the deeper point of that was to instill discipline and all that. And I get that. But something about like doing work in industry, I really enjoyed, like just kind of building something tangible. And yeah, and like a lot of the problems you solve, you kind of tackle as a team. So that was kind of cool. But anyways, so but that work experience and my current work experience is very night and day. It was actually very, very different. So that was the longest job I've ever had. And then like during grad school, I worked at Northrop. I had like a part-time internship. And then now this is truly my second like full-time job. And so like even between these two experiences, they were very, very different. And the biggest difference is like number one, the size of the company, the size of the team. Like at at my current company, um, they it's a bigger team. I think things move at a slightly slower pace, and so that has been my experience. Is it a bad thing? I actually don't think so, because I think it's given me a lot of time to kind of focus on myself, kind of discover new hobbies, reconnect with people, and so far it's great. I love it, because like I guess my first job experience, I would kind of characterize that it was a smaller team, new product, and so it was very stressful, very fast paced. A lot of things going on, wearing a lot of different hats. At this environment, it's a little slower pace. A part of it could also be because I've only been part of the company for 3 months, but like it's a very, very different culture, and I think it's natural for different companies, different industries to have very different cultures. As far as like what I did in school versus what I'm doing, it's only very, very marginally related. So like in some ways, it feels like a lot of the stuff I studied in my formal education, like I didn't get to use. And but I think like a lot of the secondary skills that I picked up along the way, I still do get to use. So yeah, my journey is kind of weird, like, and it bounced around a lot of different places. But yeah, so like I currently do, without getting into too much details, but I use data. It's basically data science. So I help I use I take advantage of the data, kind of look at trends, and use historical data to predict where future trends will go, and help the company make like $1 million decisions, basically. Like make help the company make decisions that's going to affect a lot of people. And like I feel like a lot of the technical skills I learned throughout my PhD through research. And the fact that I work in a semiconductor industry, I use some semiconductor knowledge, some semiconductor theory, but not too much of it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my experience there. I don't know. Sorry, Glenn, did you want to kind of talk a little bit about, yeah, your experience?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of similarities too. Now I've this since I've left grad school, I didn't actually complete the PhD, which is one route that a good portion of people in the PhD program end up doing, not finishing, but or taking a master's as like a consolation prize, which is no, which is not, which is a good achievement in itself, but there's I feel like there's a big identity crisis, potentially for people, during that process. When you're in a PhD program, like you mentioned, you have to associate so much of your research plan, your career focus, your research focus, and that ties in a lot with your identity. Now after career, you go through another transition where it may not be a one-to-one match, just like Chris is not a one-to-one match. So my first job after grad school actually ended up being even more of a match with my research topic than necessarily the PhD lab group I was in. but it satisfied a lot of those needs. Like, this is a startup company that was building a product that would hopefully go to market. And that felt like it was just a lot more tangible, like Chris said, like when you're building something that's going to be used and, potentially used in real life, you can feel like the impact is much greater. And that's a great feeling, that like something that you're working on and you're investing a lot of time in can actually bring value to larger markets, and you can see it visibly in the real world. I've also since changed to another company where it's also more data focused, and it's feels like a lot of the identities with my research topic and my academic training aren't as much reflected in it anymore. But I think that's totally fine, because one of the things that I learned to do when I had to, first from PhD to, okay, not going to complete this, and then going to industry, I think it's a reflection on my identity. So no, I feel like when you're in school, it's heavily tied, and a lot of my own like self-esteem is related to how much progress am I making toward that goal. But after industry, or after starting industry, I feel like my association with that career track is not as intimately tied anymore. I think a lot more of the focus in my identity is more placed on my other aspects of life. And a big part of that is, growing your own family. Like Chris and I are both engaged now, getting married and starting a family. I feel like a lot more of my mental and emotional focus is focused on that. And the job itself is becoming less of something that, I associate myself with. Like, I am this, engineer, I'm working at this company. Now it's an important part, but I feel like it's just, what am I getting out of that to support my family now? How am I using this time better to grow in these other areas of my life? And how am I able to get that finance to fund other parts that I want to grow in? So I think that's a relief. In terms of mental health, it's a huge relief that I no longer have that financial burden. That's one. And also the I feel like in your academic program, you're kind of being judged constantly. Like you're saying, the burden of, your professor judging you and them basically controlling your fate and how soon or how well you can succeed in this program. But it is kind of shifted. You have a manager that kind of controls that, but sometimes they don't have the same values and metrics that industry academics have. So sometimes it can be much looser and a little bit more organic, a little bit more natural in some ways.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's one thing that I think of.
I guess we kind of ranted a little bit there, but I think the condensed version is Glenn and I think we both relate to each other a lot in that we're doing something quite different from what we did our higher education in. It's not like as big of a difference. It's not like so much of a difference that it's like whiplash. Like, we didn't go into like real estate or anything. Somebody that is within our network, Quincy, I don't know if you heard, but he's going into consulting.
Yeah.
So he's going into like one of the big three consulting firms. And I know somebody from EGSA, the Engineering Grad Student Association Club at UCLA, who did something similar. She did a PhD in civil engineering, and then went and PhD, again, highest level of knowledge in this particular field, right? You would think, why not stick to it? But personal decisions, personal motivations arise, whether it's because, hey, this opportunity is just too good to pass up, or because, hey, I want to explore different things, different interests. So I do know people, we're definitely not like odd ones out here, but it's definitely not a surprise for people to, go to school in one thing, even get a PhD in one thing and do something different. And actually, my functional manager right now at A&D, she was a postdoc at MIT, and she did photonics. So she did photonics, and lo and behold, somehow she's running this data science team. And I had this conversation at length with Glenn here, and my personal motivation there was, I was interested. There was something, I wouldn't have taken the job if it wasn't interesting to me, right? I wouldn't have taken the job if I didn't like it. And for me, it was a combination of me wanting to learn more about that, and me wanting to grow in that particular domain, which is machine learning and big data, and using data for something. And and on top of that, the compensation is really good. So kind of a lot of factors led me to kind of make this decision. And yeah, so and it's not, and it happens, right? People make career decisions, people shift, and take opportunities as they arise. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, we it was kind of scary at first. It was kind of scary at first, and mainly for me, it was like, hey, can I even do this job, right? Like I felt like I was actually surprised that I was hired in the first place. Like I sold, I talk about my background, my experience, my skills, and they saw those skills as transferable. Fortunately for me, and so and on top of that, like I compensation, I care about it quite a bit, as I think people should, and all these things factored in to me deciding what the next step of my career was going to be. um but yeah, but but I wouldn't go as far as say that I use none of what I learned during my PhD. It's not a one-to-one match, but I use a very, very small fraction. And overall, I think the PhD taught me a lot of non-technical skills, like it taught me how to solve problems. Because when I went and started the PhD, like it was also the projects I was working on was also very different from what I had done before. It was very, I didn't know anything about photonics. I didn't know any, but I was willing to learn, and I think the opportunity was put in front of me. And I wanted to learn the skills that came with the projects that were put in front of me. And it's a cheesy thing that a lot of people say, but they say that, hey, PhD teaches you how to be a problem solver. And I think that's very true. I think that's very true, because like right now in my current environment, a lot of problems that I'm solving are very open-ended. Like a lot of them are like just to give an example, it's like, hey, we want you to look at this data and like tell us what went wrong, right? Tell us what happened. And you can use whatever techniques you want. You can use whatever methods you want, and it's up to your, and again, that's very, very open-ended. It's like it's up to you to try a lot of different things and present the results. And I would argue that I learned how to do that effectively through a combination of the PhD and my past working experiences. So yeah, life takes us to very interesting places. And yeah, I think it's important to learn from your past mistakes, learn from your past experiences, and if you kind of commit to building on that and learning more, hopefully we'll have a very long, very rewarding career. But
I guess to throw it back to John, what are you looking forward to next in your journey?
Oh man, life, I guess. Like not like I that's a weird answer, but I mean like things that aren't my primary job or preoccupation or occupation in the moment. Like I'm looking forward to not thinking about my job all the time.
Oh,
Um that sounds sad, but it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, like everybody's making money so that they can do the things they actually want to do. There are
Mhm.
definitely people out there that like love their job, and that is the thing they want to do, is like they want to use their career or their expertise to make like a very specific impact on the world. And
Mhm.
I totally respect that, and like I think that's awesome, but like that is not me. um I find science like super interesting. Like I love learning things. Like more than happy. I don't know, like overall, like PhD has been a really great experience. Or I guess it's been a very good experience for me to grow through. And but I'm looking forward to just like being able to like get a job and like not live like 100 or 300 miles away from my significant other. That'll be cool. I'm looking forward to, I don't know, like a stable career, like being able to like live my life and like basically just like not have to hopefully worry too much about like what, like I'm excited to not have to worry too much about what's next. I'm excited to be in a place where like I can take things a little slower, and like, you know, like really just figure out what things are like when I'm not under intense pressure, basically. Yeah.
Right.
I would say industry definitely feels, I mean, I think not everyone, like my managers in both recent companies, I feel like do have that constant pressure. And I've observed that they work throughout weekends sometimes or very late at night. And that's intense, especially when you have that much responsibility. But I think at least we're pretty fortunate, Chris and I, in our early career, after grad school, because Chris has more career experience, is that it doesn't feel that intense like every day. So that's a breath of fresh air, and you can kind of breathe and like cultivate other aspects of your life that you find interesting, that you want to grow in, that aren't related, because you can do both. You could still enjoy the career, but not have it be like looming over your shoulder like every night, on the weekends, where you feel like there's still stuff that has to be done, that's like due, right around the corner. And I feel like that's something I don't have anymore, and that I really appreciate, because in school I don't think you can turn it off, right? You're literally, it's on your mind, even when you don't want it to be on your mind, sometimes. So hopefully that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, there's like funding driven pressure. There's like, the professors may say, hey, the funding expires here, you have to get the results out from here. There's like there's like midterms, exams. Okay, you have up to this date to do this. I think at least in Glenn and my situation, like the deadlines are a little bit more flexible, and generally speaking, that's been my experience in the industry. Like I think at a small startup company, where there's pressure for investors, that may be a little different, but that flows down the chain of command, like definitely. I think like as an entry level engineer, the expectations are, at least in my experience, going to be fairly realistic. They're going to be, the stress levels are going to be pretty reasonable. And so far, I think the most stressed out I've been in my entire life and career was studying for prelims. Studying for prelims, that was an experience. Studying for prelims, and some experiences at my prior company. And again, at that prior company, I think it was a little bit of a fringe case, because it was a smaller team, smaller product. We had like more to prove. So I think like it depends, like it depends on the company, it depends on the environment, and maybe that'll factor in to young folks' decisions on which company they decide to join. But I don't think it's too controversial thing to say, but like usually at like the bigger companies, I've found it that like it's usually it's a little bit more lax. So long as you're showing that you're making progress. Like as an example, like I have a friend right now. He's a product manager for a pretty big company, and he jokingly tells me, "Oh yeah, if we don't make a deadline, we just kick it down the road." If we don't make a deadline, it's not the end of the road. We just like keep kicking it down the road, like. And that's generally speaking, that's been my experience as well. Not to say that people don't care about deadlines, but like the thing with like real world expectations and real world deadlines is that a deadline is really only an estimate. And like, you know, when you're doing things like managing a product and you know, like the CEO or the execs go, hey, when can you get this done? Right? You're giving your best estimate. You know, like you're giving your best estimate. You're, okay, I think with 3 developers, whatever, 4 engineers, we can get this done in 6 months. Sometimes 6 months comes along, and you can be like, okay, well, we only got like half an hour, or we only got you know, 50% of the project done. We're gonna unfortunately, these are things that we didn't account for, so we're gonna need another 3 to 6 months. And like that happens very frequently, right? Like you know, I would go as far as say that I don't think any company delivers a product on time, right? I think it's very well. I would say like it's very rare that like companies deliver products like on time. Like usually there's some, you know, setback. So, you know, I think like because of that, there uh you know, like so sometimes like the stress comes and goes. Like the stress comes and goes. Whereas I feel like at least when I was in grad school, it was a constant stress. It was kind of like this constant stress. But yeah. Anyways, without ranting too much, yeah, I think John, yeah, when you get into the workforce, yeah, hopefully, I think you'll be able to enjoy life. You know, so yeah. I guess maybe if you join the right team, you know, I would say maybe like, yeah, like work life balance is important, and especially now in this chapter of me and Glenn's life, where I eventually want to have kids. I eventually want to spend time with kids. You know, I would definitely trade like slightly less. I would gladly trade pay for a little bit more like personal time, a little bit more better work life balance. And yeah, I feel like at least right now, I'm very happy with what I have in terms of that balance. Yeah, what about you, Glenn?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I'm happy. I mean, we talked about doing this podcast when we were in grad school, but I think it became such a low priority and capital investment. Like you need some equipment, you need to take the time to learn how to use the different software. And it's that you're focused on other things in grad school, and it may not make the most sense depending on everyone's schedule and how well you can manage your time. But now I think it was a great time where, you know, we have the resources and the time to set aside to focus on it. So that's a great positive outcome. So but I don't know if you want to answer this question. It's kind of going backwards again, but I think more so than when you're in school is that you probably have to manage your sanity a little bit more than when you're in industry potentially. This varies, but I think just again with all the stuff going on in school, what are some things that you do to manage your sanity throughout all the pressure in grad school?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Just making sure. I mean, I think the
I mean, you're
biggest
still
thing,
in grad school, so
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just being able to like commiserate with people about like the experience, like people who understand. I think like, I don't think there's a better cure for like how you're feeling than basically telling somebody how you feel and then being like, I get that. Like, I understand on a deep and detailed level exactly what it is that you're feeling. And I feel that thing too sometimes. So you're not crazy. Like literally just like that exchange is like huge for mental health, I think, for me. I think another thing for me is just like, and like this is a big thing with grad students in general, but really just like anyone, like imposter syndrome is like a very real aspect of your life as a grad student, generally speaking, unless you're just like really dynamite at what you do, which those people exist too. But like, you know, for the majority of us that are going through grad school, a common thought is like basically like, what am I doing here in this moment now? Like, why am I here? And I think just like having moments to like really like reflect. And I don't know. I think for me, like a big thing is like, look how far you've gotten from where you started. Like, it's really easy for like us as people to compare ourselves to others and be like, wow, they're doing amazing. Like, what am I doing with my life? Right. But I think it's often a lot harder for you to like think and be like, man, like if John from high school met John from today, he would be so impressed. Like, look at all the things you did. Like, this is crazy. And like, I think like that's a thought that I have often, like when I don't know, when I'm feeling like maybe like things aren't going the way that I think they should be, or I'm not feeling, I guess like up to like the place I've got to. It's just like, maybe like you're not quite where you want to be, but like, look how far you've walked basically away from like where you started. It's just like, I never thought that like, I don't know, like I lived in a small town my entire life. Like so many people from my town straight up just like would join the military or like, you know, like just stay in my hometown forever, literally. Which not that there's anything wrong with either of those options, but like I didn't see myself doing what I'm doing today then. Like I didn't, there was a lot right at the time. Like it's daunting to be like, oh, like I'm going to go to college. And then after that, I guess I'll like get a job or like maybe grad school and like, who knows what that's going to be like. And when you're sitting there then in that desk, you're like, man, that is a lifetime away. And then you wake up one day and you're here and you're like, I did that. Like, I'm here now. Like, I've got some time left, but like, I'll get my PhD and then on to the next phase of life. And I just think like, sorry, it's like going on, but it's just
no,
like
you're good.
The thought that, I don't know, the thought that like you've improved yourself and that like the person that you were yesterday would be happy that the person you are today is still trying to get through things. I guess the other one would just be like, I don't know, like a sufficient network of support, which goes along with the first thing I said about like being able to commiserate with someone, but like just being able to talk to people about anything, like I think is huge sanity boost for anyone. Genuinely, like just even stuff like this is great. Like it's great catching up with you guys and seeing you again and hearing that you're doing well. Like all that stuff. Yeah.
Likewise. Yeah, no, it's great to see you, you know, continuing to grind. PhD is essentially that. And there's a lot to look forward to. And I guess to also kick it off, is there anything that are in the works? I know you don't share anything that hasn't been published yet or you can't talk about, but like what are some things that are in the scope for you that you would like people of like, you know, to check out and some of the hot topics, hot papers to be in your field that you're working on, or likewise, like if people want to reach you, how can they find you, like to like learn more about your journey or to get in touch with you to get some more personal advice from you, if you're willing to share that?
I mean, you can always go to our lab website. Dr. Rahman has a website. My email is on that website, and you can definitely like email me if you're curious about anything, about any aspects of what I do. And I guess as far as like things to look forward to, most of my projects revolve around infrared optics. So if that's like something that you find interesting, then you can definitely like, I don't know, look into my name in the next few months. There should be, hopefully, I mean, there's a paper process sort of right now. It's in process, but like I'm still working on like a few things before we actually like get the figures done. And then after that, I should have like, hopefully one more good big project that I'm hopefully going to get at least preliminary data for, but maybe even finish before I get out of here. And those will both have to do with infrared optics, basically.
Yeah, John's being humble, but we're gonna play around with editing tricks after. But I think we're gonna flash. You had a paper recently that was featured by the Daily Bruin, the UCLA newspaper. Were you interviewed for that? Like, did they receive?
Yeah, I was interviewed for that. Yeah.
We'll flash it wherever. We'll flash it on the video.
How was their interview versus ours?
I mean, definitely less comprehensive.
A quick call. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, you know, it's like maybe 30 minutes. And yeah, just about like my thoughts on the paper, but they didn't really use much of what I said in the article anyways. So
really? Oh man.
I don't know why they asked me. I mean, they interviewed Dr. Rahman too, I think. So, but like, I don't know. I don't really care. It's like, I did the work and I think it's cool, and that's all I need to know about it. Like if other people think it's cool, that's great, but that's not why I did it. You know what I mean?
I'm sure there's another young John Brewer that's like, in undergrad right now. And he's like, man, like, how do I get into Robin's lab? Like, well, who are the people working in that? And like, what can they, how can they help me? So maybe you'll meet somebody, in the near future that you could hand off some of the next few works as you complete your PhD.
Yeah. I mean, there's always new projects. Dr. Rahman's got a head full of ideas, so it'll be good. Like no shortage there.
Just one connecting to the conversation we had about like just like difference between work and school, the question that you had. Just one final thing to ask there. But yeah, what was your experience like? Just you mentioned you hadn't worked before, but this past summer you did expose yourself. I think a part of the weirdness about working culture right now is what COVID has done to it, and like made things remote. And I feel like it's done a lot of disservice to a lot of people who maybe looking forward to working their first job, and only to have a lot of the personal interaction taken away. So I guess what I have to say to that is even like joining this new company, that has been a very, very different experience that has definitely affected the experience that I think I would have had if it was like completely in person. Because my prior job, like the long-term job that I had, all of that was in person, and a lot of the fondest memories I had was like hang out with my coworkers, just going out to lunch, brainstorming ideas in person. And I feel like COVID has like taken away a lot of that. Definitely taken away a lot of that. But yeah, anyways, curious to hear what some of your takes are.
Yeah. My internship definitely got me excited about working. But I asked about your full-time experience because like I understand that an internship isn't necessarily representative of what working for a company full-time might be like. And I know even in some companies, like the expectations can change extremely dramatically between those two things. They generally do, I would say. Like the level of responsibility is generally higher because they know that you're going to be there for a long time, hopefully. And so, yeah, I will say I thought it was an awesome experience. My work-life balance was like better than it's been in like literally years. So like that was like a terrible thing to learn, I guess, and then have to go back. I mean, yeah. I mean, like it's just like knowing.
Just keep going back to your high school version. That whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah. In this case, like I don't know, like I definitely think that level is a better fit, and I agree that like things are much more team based. Like in grad school, a big aspect of it is you're kind of a one-man army, and you have like your professor who's obviously very knowledgeable about the big picture stuff that you need to figure out. But when it comes to the day-to-day problems, some of which you may have like literally no expertise on, it's all you. Like the ball's in your court every day. Like, and so like, it's just a series of like, oh, like I solved this problem and now I have more problems to solve. Like, that's what I get for solving this problem. Which is like what it is. Like, that's what it is for everything. But at least
job
like
security though. Security.
In the internship experience, it's a lot more like, oh, like I solved this problem. And you do get more problems, but it's a lot more like, I don't know, like it's not, you're not an island anymore, right? Like if you have a real issue that you need help with and like you can solve it faster by talking to somebody, you're going to be encouraged to do that because time is money. Whereas opposed to grad school, like grad school is about growth, like intellectual and personal growth into having the abilities necessary to solve complicated problems alone, like basically based off of hopefully like most, if not all, your own intellectual merit in a topic. And so basically having that like ability to reach out to collaborate more strongly with others and being encouraged to do so basically just means if you have a problem, like solving it isn't as make or break. Like it won't stop you in your tracks. If you can't solve a problem, there will be someone else who can, and nobody cares. Like you just have to say like, oh yeah, like, can we talk to somebody else about this? And it's like that easy to, you know, deal with it, as opposed to the grad school experience of, oh, like, can I talk to somebody else about this? No, like, is you can do this, and then it's up to you what happens after that. But like, other than that, like, you just have to figure it out. So yeah.
I mean, there's pros and cons with that. And I think the one thing I'll say to that is that in industry, because it's collaborative, you're working in multiple teams. It can be competitive too. And then that comes into play, which is work politics, competing for resources, competing for credit. That ends up becoming, or it can become very toxic and destructive. Whereas at least it's just you versus the work when it's as independent as it is a grad school experience. So there's trade-offs, and I don't think there's necessarily the best situation for that's like a blanket statement for all people, but learning to navigate both of those have their own challenges. So it's a bad thing, but it's not all rainbows and sunshine in industry.
Yeah.
Did you find anything like particularly challenging about the internship, like as far as the difficulty level, right? Like between like as far as addressing the problems, like the workload, how would you compare that between like grad school and like what the expectations were like during your internship?
I mean, I was very like, they're very different. Like I think like grad school is a series of poorly defined problems. And so a lot of your time is spent defining the problem itself. Like, it's not even like, oh, like I'm going to figure this out. It's like, what do I need to figure out? Like, what is the thing that is stopping me from making progress? Like, it's a lot of like diagnoses, basically. And at least in my internship, like what they wanted was pretty clear, like to the point where like they gave me like a very broad sense of direction, which obviously is what happens in grad school too. But like once I started producing, like the clarification that they gave was like very clear. Like, nice. Oh, like this is good. Can you do this too? Like once they had something to start with, after they'd given me like some initial direction, they like pointing me into what to do next was like very clear. And like, I didn't ever have to worry about that aspect of things. So I guess.
So the work was really clearly defined, that you just need to do it.
Yeah.
And then along the way, if you didn't have the skill set, like somebody would be there to teach you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, there are multiple people on my team. And if there's ever anything that I like needed to know something about, I would just ask, like I would just email them and they'd be like, oh yeah, like this is what it is. You know, it's, I think one thing that like is, and you talked about this as well, like remote work has like really changed the landscape of like just like work. Like remote work has really changed things, and my internship was remote. So like it was kind of a bummer that I didn't actually get to meet any of my team in person. But like I still like got to interact with them. They were all really nice people. And like, I think like if I met them in person, they would also just be really cool about the way, like they would be the same type of people that they were like basically while I was working with them on my internship in a professional capacity, but I would hopefully get to like know more about them in a personal capacity. But yeah, like that was the only other thing, like in grad school, or at least at one point in grad school, it's very much like you're just, I mean, the social aspect of things is covered, right? You don't have to worry about making friends really. You're kind of forced to because of the environments that you're put into. But work isn't really like that. It's just like, oh, I did this work. I'll see you next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like remote work hasn't done that any favors, of course. But yeah, that's about it. Yeah. It was a good experience though. Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Right on. Yeah. It sounds kind of mundane, but yeah, work. I don't have too much to say about work. Work's work.
No, I know. I want
it's-
work to be mundane. I don't want it to be exciting, or at least not too exciting. Like I want it to be interesting, but I don't want it to be stressful. And I think those are two different things for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess thanks for coming on, John. And yeah, hope you have a good one.
Yeah.